Loki's idol has been revealed, and it is Rocksteady Zebek, a man so terrible that the world government conspired to remove his name from the history. A man who was once called Goldie Roger's greatest rival, more so than Whitebeard, more so than Garp. And on Elbaph, we have a modern day meeting of this inherited rivalry with Luffy and Loki. But before we get into anything else, something that is extremely worthy of acknowledgement this week is the color spread, because this is a special guest color spread, and I'm not sure if that's ever happened before. At the very least, I can't recall if it has. But this image was drawn by Midori Matsuda, who's been a character designer and animation director for the One Piece anime, which is celebrating its official return after a 6-month break. And I love the spread with all the Straw Hats just chilling and watching the actual Egghead Island anime, except for Zoro, who even sitting down in a room surrounded by TVs is still going in the wrong direction. And on the clock in this color spread, you can see that it's 11:15 p.m. That's because the One Piece time slot has now changed. It airs at 11:15 p.m. in Japan, whereas it used to air at 9:30 a.m. And it's speculated that part of the time slot change was to get rid of all the censorship that comes with airing a show in a kid's TV time slot, but I am extremely excited to check out the Egghead anime return. I'm hoping that this break has fixed all of the pacing issues, and that more breaks are going to be taken in the future to keep the pacing solid. But into the chapter itself, the opening was extremely chill considering everything else happening on Elbaph at the moment, and what we actually have here is over 1,000 chapters of character development all coming to fruition. I was initially a bit confused to see a dinosaur on Elbaph because yes, this island has big creatures, but I didn't think it was a prehistoric island like Little Garden, but then it hit me. Little Garden. This arc is often flagged as the true beginning of the Zoro Sanji rivalry, which we saw hints of on Baratie, and they did get into a fight about Nami's breast size in Kokoyashi Village, or at least that's what Sanji thought they were fighting about. But on Little Garden, they had their hunting contest to see who could bag the biggest of the beasts, something that drove Zoro and Sanji apart for the entire arc, and yet here we are, more than 1,000 chapters later on Elbaph, again on a giant-themed island, but this time Zoro and Sanji are working together to hunt a dinosaur. And they're not just hunting together, no, they are actively working together. And they're using the same technique that they innovated on Long Ring Longland, Armée de l'Air, where Sanji launches Zoro at a giant opponent to give him that increased speed and force to take it down. And the creature they're aiming at on Elbaph is a Groggysaurus. Funny name, sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? And that's because they originally used this combo attack during the Groggy Ring game. So Oda's really slapping us in the face with nostalgia right from the get-go in this here chapter. And there's been a lot of flags recently that's made me quite hyper aware of just how comparatively soon One Piece is ending. Luffy becoming an emperor, we've got almost all the road poneglyphs, and the fact that we're even on Elbaph, that is very endgame material. But nothing has made me feel more like the end is near than to finally see Zoro and Sanji voluntarily working together in a non-life or death situation. And in addition to this landmark moment of teamwork, this opening section, pretty chill opening section, also contains some pretty vital lore via Goldberg. It's been suspected that his shield, now named Nash, was a homie ever since we first saw it on the Straw Hat Grand Fleet cover page, simply because, well, what else could it be? And as it turns out, yeah, it is a homie, but it is not one created by Big Mom. Nash was given life 63 years ago during the incident with Charlotte Lin during the winter solstice, where very young Charlotte Lin went on a bit of a rampage, similar, rah, and it was used by Goldberg's father, meaning that Nash was created by Mother Carmel. That's very important because Mother Carmel is quite dead, but Nash is not, which answers a long-standing question we've had about Big Mom. The last time we saw her was during her refreshing lava bath with Kaido, and one of the main reasons why it's been hard to assume that she's dead despite sinking into lava is because, well, firstly, it's One Piece, you can't ever assume death, but secondly, because Zeus is still alive, and we didn't know how the Soul Saw fruit functioned after death. But it appears that homies that are given life are not bound to the life of the fruit user, even homies created directly from the soul of that user. So Big Mom could genuinely be dead. We could go the rest of One Piece, never see her again, and just assume that there was no way that she or Kaido could have survived. And right now, the only thing that makes me stop and question her life status is Charlotte Pudding, because she had this little clap back at the Blackbeard Pirates about what her mother was gonna do to them if she's still alive, which I could see being a bit of foreshadowing for Big Mom to rock up and go on a Blackbeard Pirate rampage. I mean, she has every reason to. After Wano, they're the ones who invaded her territory, beat up her children, and abducted her Pudding. Anyway, Nash, the Shield, is 63 years old, which makes him older than Kaido and 2 years younger than Dr. Vegapunk, who was 65 years old at the time of his maiden baby death. Do you ever look at people who were born around the same time as you and wonder, where did my life go wrong? For example, Novak Djokovic, he's only 2 years older than me, but he's won 24 career Grand Slams and I've won 0. Although again, he is 2 years older than me, so I've got time to catch up. But that's how I imagine Nash feels about his life compared to Vegapunk. Sure, you've slammed your face into some dinosaurs, but how many limitless energy sources have you provided for all of humanity, Although I can tell you that Luffy's doing his best to provide energy on a much smaller scale. Luffy has assumed a pretty hilarious role at the moment, acting as Loki's sort of nurse, his meat nurse, shoving horrifically hot food in his mouth and spilling scalding soup on him. It's one of those moments that reminds me that sometimes Luffy can be far more dangerous as an ally than he is as an enemy. When Luffy genuinely cares about you, there may be something to fear. Although I really liked Gerd's thumbs up, approving of Luffy's accidental actions. As a doctor, I imagine that she does have some sort of moral duty of care to Loki, but she still wants to inflict as much pain as possible on him without risking any serious injury and or death. And that sort of winking thumbs up is never used well in One Piece. There is always something sinister behind it. Like when we saw a very motivational image of Frankie doing it in the distance after he self-destructed Vegapunk's slab on Karakuri Island. The whole thing is almost Boa Hancock-esque. You strike this pose because it's like, yeah, I know what I did was wrong, but you'll forgive me because I'm very cute. But one of the more interesting parts about this chapter was that moment of bonding between Luffy and Loki, with both of them finding out that they have their respective idolized pirating mentors. For Luffy, that's Shanks, which is a big sore spot for Loki as the man who defeated him. But of all the things I wasn't expecting, Loki's equivalent of Shanks was Rox Beck. And we even have a tantalizingly short and very obscured flashback of Loki trying to join the Rox pirates. In retrospect, I don't know why I didn't expect this. In fact, I'm pretty sure I've even mentioned now on multiple occasions that Loki's goal is extremely similar to Rox's goal, if not outright the same. So of all of the people in this world, of course, Loki's going to look up to Rox. And that's one more thing that is potentially setting up a larger conflict with Luffy, as Loki wants to follow in the path of Rox, whilst Luffy is taking on the will of Rox's greatest rival, Roger. But what we've done here is continue the trend of great pirates saying no to annoying children. Shanks, of course, did this right at the beginning of the series with Luffy and much more recently on Elbaph with Colin. But Roger was also approached by a child who wanted to join his crew. That child's name was Pedro, and Roger said, nah, mate. And now we've got Rox being approached by Loki, who reacted rather violently, perhaps too violently. I just want to linger on the fact that Oda chose Edward Newgate to be placed in this scene, because the contextual decision-making in this chapter is pretty disgustingly deliberate. Oda could have chosen any Rox pirate or any number of Rox pirates to put in this scene, but he chose Whitebeard because Whitebeard's dream was to have a family. So seeing Rox reject a child continues to tell the story of placing these two characters at odds and making me even more curious as to how Rox managed to recruit Whitebeard in the first place. And sure, this may sound like the rambling wankery of a man on the internet, but consider this. Whitebeard never turned down a request to join his crew. He may have played a little bit hard to get as he did with Kozuki Oden, but Whitebeard never rejected a potential son. And the one time we did see him recruit a child, it turned out to be Marshall D. Teach, who would eventually orchestrate the death of Whitebeard. And there's no doubt in my mind that part of the reason why Whitebeard let Teach join the crew was because of this experience. Whitebeard here feels a lot of empathy for Loki, like, Rox, mate, you didn't have to beat the crap out of him that badly. And so when a similar situation came around for Whitebeard, Whitebeard wanted to handle it his way, the daddy way. And it's quite devious since Teach is heavily hinted to be the man who did inherit the will of Rox Beck, and begging Whitebeard as a child to join his crew is now starting to feel almost like Blackbeard knew Whitebeard's weakness to children and family, and he took advantage of that. As for how this alleged child would know that, I don't know. But we do know now that Rox knew. So this meta mystery just got a lot more interesting. At first, I was also a bit taken aback as to why Rox didn't accept Loki's request to join the crew, because Rox was more than happy to have Kaido come aboard, who joined the Rox Pirates when he was only 15 years old, although that wasn't necessarily Rox's decision. Kaido was actually invited to join the crew by Whitebeard, although it was said that Rox wanted to meet Kaido. So if Rox encountered Kaido first, then maybe things would have gone the same way. I don't know, maybe it is just a skill issue. Child Loki wasn't anywhere nowhere near Kaido's level. And I suppose the best way to put it is that Loki, when he challenged Zebek, was about like 20 years old at most. The God Valley incident and Zebek's defeat happened almost 40 years ago, and Loki's 63 years old, so at most he's in his early 20s when he challenges Roxia, which is about the same age as Colin. So maybe one way you can look at this is that this was the equivalent of Colin trying to challenge Shanks. And Loki claims that he was born in the wrong era, which if his dream is truly to destroy the world, then, he's probably correct. If he'd been slightly older during the era of rocks, then he would have joined them, and Loki's power, which is now considered to be worth a 2 billion berry threat, could have tipped the entire God Valley incident in favor of rocks and doomed the world to whatever that path was going to be. So I'm kind of torn on what happens from here. Do we repeat the past? Do we inherit the wills and have Loki become one of perhaps even the greatest of Luffy's rivals? Or do we change destiny? Do we mold our own wills, and do we join forces to overcome a much greater mutual enemy? With the mutual enemy that you and I have being boredom, and the weapon against that being the Calm Belt, which is a channel currently undertaking the project of re-editing the Grand Line Review video library into themed compilations. Very long videos perfect for your very long form activities like driving, drawing, gaming, sleeping, whatever it is you do for extended periods of time, we've got you covered for as long as it takes, with no need to pause what you're doing and pick a new video every 15 minutes or so. They're not just compilations either, because throughout the years there have been what I refer to as lost videos, and these are Grand Line Review projects that were fully written, recorded, and edited. However, for various different reasons, were never published. I'm not going to tell you where they are, how many there are, or even what they are though, because that's not really in the spirit of One Piece, is it? My videos, they're yours if you want them. I left everything I own in the link in the description. So if this new long-form channel meets your needs, then please do check it out and make sure to subscribe, because that is insanely important for small channels, and I look forward to seeing you there. But for now, let's get back to you, me. Thanks, me. Right now, elsewhere, Scopogamon has very quickly and easily dealt with the Nightmare Loki, pointing out what we suspected, which is that the kids have no idea how truly powerful and horrifying Loki can be. So their imagination wasn't enough to reach Loki's true heights, or indeed the heights of those other suspected nightmare creatures. And I have to say that things are continuing to go quite well for now. Across the board, nightmare creatures are falling. Here, Sol also beat Fenrir, and Dory and Broggy are just plowing through the Draugr and the ghosts, laughing the whole time. And then Jinbei even rocks up just in time to put out that fire that was going to kill all of the children, much like he put out the flames on Onigashima thanks to Raizo's water scroll, and once again proving the worth of having a water type in your team in all scenarios. But during this section, there's a very curious moment where Gunko and Summers are speaking to one another as the kids are about to walk into the flames. And this is a case where I'll cement my opinion with the official translation, because at the moment I do think this can be taken either way. Summers is asking Gunko whether or not the kid's gonna wake up if they walk into the fire because he's trying to get hard or something. He gets off on this. And Gunko responds with an excruciatingly detailed report from the future of exactly what's going to happen to them. And on the one hand, you could read this as Gunko displaying that rather sadistic world noble trait of gleefully enjoying what's happening, breaking it down step by step as if savoring a meal. Or you could take it as a very neutral and factual, maybe even disgusted, straightforward answer to St. Summers' question. Summers is definitely the only one taking clear pleasure in what's happening here, and this might just be my agenda, but I don't think that Gunko is. Because we've already seen her happy and content when she's eating the food and listening to the music, and this doesn't look like that at all. And maybe there's some reason behind the choice to keep her face covered, maybe in order to hide her true feelings whenever this sort of world noble shenaniganry happens, and she just needs to stand there and watch. Meaning that Gunko is now face to face with Brook. I wasn't expecting them to come into contact so quickly. So I'm thinking that it is now or never for Brook. It is panty time. With the masterful twist being that he can already see said panties, and this could play into both of Brook's jokes. He could ask to see panties, then claim that he can already see them, but then state that he doesn't have eyes, thus giving us our very first hybrid skull panty joke. We all know where Brook's attention is gonna be going. But of course, I'm infinitely more curious about Gunko because she doesn't appear to realize that Brook is on the ship yet. And I suppose it is possible that Gunko doesn't know Soul King Brook by face. She may have just found the TD with New World recorded on it and kept it, in which case Brook asking for panties may become a surprisingly important plot point, because that could be how Gunko recognizes him. This is a bit of a stretch though, because I don't even know if this is canon in the One Piece manga, probably not, because the New World lyrics have never been revealed in the manga. But in the anime and on the officially released soundtrack, Brook asks politely yet belligerently to see panties during the song. So if Gunko doesn't immediately recognize Brook, then perhaps she will recognize recognize his lyrical mastery, or at the very least think that he's also a fan of the song. All in all though, it's hard not to be feeling quite confident at the end of this chapter. The fire's been put out, the nightmare creatures are falling, Gunko is now facing off directly against 4 Straw Hats with 2 more in the general vicinity, and Loki's having a lovely meal, so he should be up and running quite shortly. Despite the fact that Gerd said it would take him months to recover, that's not going to happen. Or if it does, I guess Loki's going to fight with his wounds during this arc. And so now I'm really just waiting for the next big thing to hit. Right now we look dangerously close to cleaning up this problem without Luffy, Zoro, or Sanji even needing to be involved, which I just can't imagine is how this arc ends. And one character we don't see in this chapter is Saint Killingham, and that does worry me because he could pop up anywhere. Given how Gunko seems fixated on Colin at the end of the chapter, Killingham could be ready and waiting to put Colin to sleep and bring out his greatest fear, which I would love to see. Or the escalation could switch to bringing out the greatest fears of the adults, and thus conjuring a Loki much closer to the power of the real Loki. Because every adult giant has fought Loki at this point, they needed all of them to bring him under command, so all the giants are hyper aware of Loki's true power, and their nightmares may even exaggerate it, unlike the kids who underestimated it. Or we can also take things a step further and bring out the fears of the Straw Hats, which I think would be really fun, and we do still have the mystery of Loki's devil fruit to solve, which could bring us a lot of trouble as well. But whatever the case may be, I don't think we're ready to wrap things up here, and things are only going to get a lot worse on Elbaph before they permanently get better, if indeed they do permanently get better.